بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Welcome once again to another episode of our series on the Quran in the month of Ramadan, going over the book written by Imam al-Nawawi called At-Tibyan fi Adabi Hamalat al-Quran. So it's a book dedicated to the importance of the Quran and the etiquettes that one should embody in relation to the Quran. Continuing from where we left off, the author he mentions and he quotes the narration of Abdullah ibn Abbas. So he says, وعن ابن عباس رضي الله عنهما قال, Ibn Abbas رضي الله عنهما, he said, أكرم الناس علي جليسي الذي يتخطى الناس حتى يجلس إليه. So Ibn Abbas رضي الله عنهما, as many of us are very well aware of, he was one of the great companions, younger companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he was also somebody who had a huge amount of knowledge. So he's somebody who was considered to be one of the scholarly figures amongst the companions. Somebody who was very well endowed with intelligence and also a huge amount of knowledge. And by the time when he grew older, he had a lot of students. And there were many of the great tabi'in and scholars of the tabi'in who were also the students of Abdullah ibn Abbas. He mentions here in this narration, وعن ابن عباس رضي الله عنهما قال, so Abdullah ibn Abbas, he said, أكرم الناس علي جليسي الذي يتخطى الناس حتى يجلس إلي. He said, the best and the most honored of the people to me are those people who come to me and sit with me, meaning as a student, meaning they pass by all of the others until they come to me, because they come to me seeking to learn. Those are the most honorable people in my eyes. And he said, لو استطعت ألا يقع الذباب على وجهه لفعلت. He said, had I had the power to make sure that even a fly doesn't fall on their face, I would have made sure that would have happened. So he's talking about the immense respect and love and admiration that he has for people who want to come and learn. It's not only necessarily just about coming to him because they're coming to him, but because of the dedication that they show in wanting to learn and wanting to gain that knowledge. And in another variation of the hadith, for riwayatin, he said, إِنَّ الذُّبَابَ لَيَقَعُ عَلَيْهِ فَيُؤْذِينِي. So he said, so much so, he said, the fact that if a fly were to fall on their face, I wouldn't want that to happen because it would really bother me. Meaning, I don't want them to be in any state of discomfort when they've come to me to want to learn. I would want to honor them so much that I would wish that even if there was a fly that would come and that would fall on their face, I would want to be the one that removes that from them so that they're not disturbed or uncomfortable in any way whatsoever. So the level of hospitality that's also attached to the education is very important. The fact that he wanted as a teacher to honor the student and to make them feel comfortable in an educational environment. That's something which is very, very important, and it's very conducive to the growth of any student. So any student who has a good environment whilst they're learning, it kind of encourages them to learn more. So by placing all of the factors in education that enable a student to learn, then the chances of them benefiting is multiplied. Then he said, Imam al-Nawawi, وَيَنْبَغِي أَلَّا يَتَعَظَّمَ عَلَى الْمُتَعَلِّمِينَ. So he said, it's incumbent and very important, he said, that the teachers do not exert a huge amount of power over their students. So they do not go on a power trip, or they do not make the student feel as if though they're inferior and that they are there to kind of punish them if they were to do something wrong straight away. So do not feel like ta'zeem, as in I am much more powerful than you, I am greater than you. You shouldn't make the student feel as if the student is an inferior. You know, he says, بَلْ يَلِينُ لَهُمْ. So the teacher should be kind and courteous. وَيَتَوَاضَعُ مَعَهُمْ. And they should also be humble with the students. And then Imam Nawawi, he says, فَقَدْ جَاءَ فِي التَّوَاضُعِ لِآحَادِ النَّاسِ أَشْيَاءُ كَثِيرَةٌ مَعْرُوفَةٌ. He said, there has been so much that's been said about the importance of being humble for the average person, for the average human being, meaning for people who have no relation to you whatsoever. The importance of being humble towards the creation, there's been so much things that has been said about that, meaning in our tradition. Then he says, فَكَيْفَ بِهَؤُلَاءِ الَّذِينَ هُمْ بِمَنْزِلَةِ أَوْلَادِهِ. Then what can be said about those people who are on the level of his children, meaning the students? So if the Sharia encourages greatly that a person should be humble towards the creation, then how much more humble should a person be to their student? Okay, for the ones who are going to want to learn. That's why Imam Nawawi says, مَعَ مَا هُمْ عَلَيْهِ, especially considering the fact, مَعَ مَا هُمْ عَلَيْهِ مِنَ الْإِشْتِغَالِ بِالْقُرْآنِ, considering the fact, especially so, that they are there and they're busying themselves with the Qur'an. مَعَ مَا لَهُمْ عَلَيْهِ مِنْ حَقِّ الصُّحْبَةِ وَتَرَدُّدِهِمْ إِلَيْهِ, and also the extra amount of rights that they have in relation to companionship, meaning between the teacher and the student, and the fact that the student is one who's always returning back to him in order to gain knowledge and always learn more. And this type of education is, I think, almost come extinct, especially in the Western world. It's not something that's really it's not something that exists. Now you have institutions where a person goes to learn for a few hours and then you go and you leave. So that there's no real relationship between a teacher and the student in that way anymore, in which, your teacher is kind of like a parent to you, and the teacher sees the student as like their own child. This is something that still kind of remains in some pockets of the world today, but it's something which is quickly dying out. So the importance of education being more than just teaching somebody what a book says, or more than just teaching somebody during a few hours of the day, and then after that time period comes to an end, the student and the teacher don't know each other. So that kind of style of education and teaching is something that's kind of like a more of a contemporary recent concept, and it kind of became much more it's become much more emphasized with the onset of the building of big institutions and universities and colleges and things like that, because then it means that this is in the institute, that's where the relationship between the teacher begins and ends. Whereas in the past, especially in the distant past, it was never really like that. A teacher would always remain a teacher, out of hours also, and that relationship would always be there no matter what. And education was much more than just teaching the person the basics. It was more about also teaching the person life skills, and also teaching the person, about life, generally speaking. So the teacher would also expose the student to, their experiences in life and what they've seen, so that they can give the student a much better understanding of the world that they live in. It's not really something that's obviously seen today. So some people might kind of find what's being mentioned here a bit strange, but you have to realize that this was the norm in the past. This was how it used to be. You could go to your teacher in the evening, you could go to their house and you can talk to them and you can ask for advice, and they would host you. And likewise, the student would host their teacher if the teacher wanted to come and see him or her. So a lot of things have changed, and that's just obviously to do with the changing of the times. وقد جاء, the Prophet, then the author, he says, وقد جاء عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم, and there are traditions that came from the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, stating that he said, لينوا لمن تعلمون وَلِمَنْ تَتَعَلَّمُونَ مِنْهُ. Be soft and kind to those whom you are teaching and to those whom you are learning from. So the teacher and the student should both be kind to each other. And this is mentioned, Al-Khatib al-Baghdadi, he mentioned this in his book Al-Faqih wal-Mutafaqih. Al-Daylami also mentions it in Al-Firdaus, in a narration that was transmitted from Abi Hurairah radiyallahu anhu. Then Imam Nawawi he continues and he says, وعن أيوب السختياني رحمه الله تعالى. So this is one of the early Muslims. He said a famous statement that he made, in which he said, and he's talking about the importance of the teacher being extremely humble. So, and the reason why a teacher should be humble is because he or she shouldn't assume that because they carry a certain amount of knowledge, that this kind of makes them superior in any way to anybody else. And obviously, a person might not really understand the importance of why that is, or why a person should always be humble. They might not understand that, but obviously, it has everything to do with sincerity. So if a person is wants to be sincere, then obviously they need to also be humble, because there's a very strong relation. And he mentions this, and he says, ينبغي للعالم أن يضع التراب على رأسه تواضعا لله عز وجل. So he said, and this is also collected by Al-Khatib al-Baghdadi in his book Al-Faqih wal-Mutafaqih, but Al-Ajuri also mentions it in his book Akhlaqi Hamlat al-Quran, that it's important for somebody who has been endowed with knowledge that they place the earth on their head as a sign of humbleness to Allah. Obviously, a person doesn't have to do this, but the importance is that you understand the message that's being relayed, which is the importance that a person who has scholarly knowledge to be also extremely humble, to the point in which even if it means that they have to throw dust on their head or earth on their head for them to come to that for them to reach that level of being humble, then that's very, very important. And you'd be really surprised in Islamic history how important many people took this. There were some madrasas in the past, especially in the western part of the Islamic world, so like in Al-Maghrib and these other places, where there would be communities of people who, once they've learned the Quran and they memorized the Quran and they learned much of the religious sciences, what they would do is they would take out an entire year just to be a cleaner. So they would take a job as a janitor or a cleaner in order for them to humble themselves, because now they finished the process of education. So they learnt the knowledge, but now the time has arrived to also humble the heart and to also make the person understand, but you've learnt a lot of knowledge, and in that there is a level of privilege, but at the same time, know your place and know your position with Allah. You're not better than anybody else. You're not superior in any way. So what they would do is they would take out an entire year as an example. So that's an average. So they would take out an entire year after their education, and they would take menial jobs in order to humble themselves. And this was just a process of training. I mean, some of the scholars, they said that was really good to do, and that's something which is very important because a practical way of learning how to be humble. And others say that it's more of a spiritual practice, so it's not really needed. I mean, it's open to debate, but whatever the case may be, it's always important to understand that not to lose the goal. So the goal was what? To be humble, and that's really a requirement. That's very, very important. All that he continues and he says, alayhi rahmatullah, and this is speaking about the importance of the education. So في تأديب and instilling etiquette. So في تأديب المتعلم بالآداب السنية. So this is talking about giving the student, or causing and helping the student to embody themselves with the best etiquettes. So في تأديب المتعلم بالآداب السنية. الآداب السنية is talking about the the most lofty and exalted of etiquette. So Imam Nawawi, he says, وَيَنْبَغِي أَنْ يُؤَدِّبَ الْمُتَعَلِّمَ على التدريج بالآداب السنية. So the role of a teacher isn't simply to, impart with the knowledge or disseminate information. That's not really the job of a teacher. You can, even your enemy could tell you something that you can potentially benefit from, piece of information. But that doesn't make them a teacher. A teacher also prepares the student for the types of characteristics that they would need to embody in order to be a noble human being in the world that we live in. So especially this was taken to be very, very serious in the past. So there would be classes specifically embodying students and teaching students how to behave. I mean, you don't find that nowadays. In fact, nowadays, some people might even frown upon the idea of teaching students how to behave, because they think every student should behave the way they want to. But that's just completely nonsense, and it's not true. There should be there's an expectation. Society has an expectation from the people who live in that society to behave in a certain way. So should this be taught? I mean, in the past it was taught. People were taught how to behave. People were taught how to speak. People were taught courtesy. People were taught how to be polite. People were taught, how to behave towards other people in society, how to behave towards the elders, how to behave towards the younger people, how to behave towards people who are older than you, how to behave towards the institutions that are in the society, how to behave towards authority, how to behave towards, people of religion. And all of this stuff was something which was considered to be extremely important. Now, Nawawi, he says, وَيَنْبَغِي أَنْ يُؤَدِّبَ الْمُتَعَلِّمَ عَلَى التَّدْرِيجِ بِالْآدَابِ السَّنِيَّةِ. He says it's important for the teacher to teach the student etiquettes in a way in which it can be, so in a gradual process, teaching them the loftiest and the best etiquettes, so that they can embody these until it becomes their own characteristic and attribute. So it can become their own attributes. وَشَيِّمِ الْمَرْضِيَّةِ, and the most pleasurable of character. وَرِيَاضَةِ نَفْسِهِ بِالدَّقَائِقِ الْخَفِيَّةِ, and also to teach them how to train their souls so that they can be alerted to even the subtleties. Okay? وَيُعَوِّدَهُ الصِّيَانَةَ فِي جَمِيعِ أُمُورِهِ الْبَاطِنَةِ وَالْجَلِيَّةِ. And the teacher should help the student become accustomed, okay, to how to be able to understand all of their situations, the inward and the outward. So a person, a teacher in the past, a teacher would teach the student how to be able to, be in tune with their own souls and their own, their own spirit. That was considered to be something really important. So having, teaching how to do that, how, as if though it was kind of like training almost, for them to, so giving them spiritual training. This was something which the teachers in the past used to do. And then Imam An-Nawawi says, وَيُحَرِّضَهُ بِأَقْوَالِهِ وَأَفْعَالِهِ الْمُتَكَرِّرَاتِ عَلَى الْإِخْلَاصِ وَالصِّدْقِ وَحُسْنِ النِّيَّاتِ. And he goes, and he would always encourage the student through his words and through his actions repetitively in relation to talking about things like ikhlas, sincerity, and showing through their actions, showing them by encouraging them through their actions and through their words, sincerity, truthfulness, and having good intentions. وَمُرَاقَبَةِ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى فِي جَمِيعِ اللَّحَظَاتِ, and being aware and conscious of Allah in every situation. وَيُعَرِّفَهُ أَنَّ بِذَلِكَ تَنْفَتِحُ عَلَيْهِ أَبْوَابُ الْمَعَارِفِ, and that he should make him or her recognize that by doing so would cause all of the doors of understanding and comprehension to open for this person. وَيَنْشَرِحُ صَدْرُهُ, and that their chest will expand. This is an expression to suggest that this person would be what? They would start understanding much more. If things will start opening, they will have openings. Okay, وَيَتَفَجَّرُ مِنْ قَلْبِهِ يَنَابِيعُ الْحِكَمِ وَاللَّطَائِفِ. And by doing so, what would the results be? The heart of this person would open up with wisdom and understanding. So al-lata'if means, usually is referring to, you know, sometimes it could mean common phrases, a type of understanding which is small but has, enumerates a huge amount of meaning and contains a huge amount of meaning. And sometimes they use it to interchangeably. وَيُبَارِكُ وَيُبَارِكُ لَهُ فِي عِلْمِهِ وَحَالِهِ. And but this would cause them to have barakah in their knowledge, meaning blessings in their knowledge and their condition, generally speaking. وَيُوَفَّقُ فِي أَفْعَالِهِ وَيُبَارَكُ لَهُ فِي عِلْمِهِ وَحَالِهِ. By doing this, there would be blessing in their knowledge and in their condition, and they will have tawfiq. وَيُوَفَّقُ. Tawfiq means that you have inspiration. So they have divine inspiration in the actions that they do and what they say. So by being close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a person would have tawfiq in what they do and what they say. Allah will bless them. So it's something which is very important then for us to understand, that education is much more than just learning information. Education is learning everything about life. And that's what the teachers in the past used to impart their students. And it's something that kind of needs to be revived today, if we can say that. Inshallah, we'll stop it there for this session, inshallah, and we'll continue from where we left off into next segment. Jazakumullah khair for joining us once again. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.